Hello, this is Hector Vladimir. Today is the 21st of April 2024. Today I'd like to share this study trial that I have done for an electric vehicle, the 2023 Nissan Ariya Engage. This trial is basically a performance and efficiency trial or test or study for this vehicle. It has a wealth of information, I believe, because I gathered all this data from a recent trip I took, which was quite substantial. The trip was in total 2,883 kilometers, and I did gather a lot of real world, real time, real life data for this vehicle. And it could be used for all kinds of stuff, including just to know what the vehicle performance is in real world conditions, and to know what you can expect to pay for charging, for example, to know what you could expect as far as how it will go on your trip if you go on a long distance or even a short distance trip. See how many times you have to stop, see how far it'll go. There's a wealth of information here that I'd like to share, and I gathered it all and put it in a spreadsheet, which I will likely share on this platform as a download. Of course, you can also make your own. It is not difficult to make, and I will go through each of the cells. That way you can follow along and see what I put and how you can duplicate this. Some of the details on the vehicle which I tested. It was again for the 2023 Nissan Ariya Engage. Of course, that vehicle has many trim levels, and the one I tested is the one I own, the Nissan Ariya Engage with the 66 kilowatt hour battery. This vehicle has a range of about 348 kilometers per charge. That is about 216 miles. It has, of course, an electric motor, 1 speed direct drive for the transmission. It's a front wheel drive. It seats about 5 people, and it has a EPA City Highway MPGE rating of 109 MPGE for city and 94 MPGE for highway. This is per the website edmunds.com. It says here that you can also charge this vehicle in about 10 hours using the 240 volts AC source. The horsepower for the motor is 240 horsepower, and it also has 221 pounds-foot of torque, or foot-pounds of torque. The maximum load capacity, as it says here on this website, is 990 pounds, and it is a front-wheel drive. The curb weight for the vehicle, according to Nissan, is about 4,323 pounds. That is about 1,961 kilograms. The weight could range depending on the trim and model of this vehicle. It could range all the way up to 5,057 pounds. Which is about 2,294 kilograms. And those are the details of the vehicle that are perhaps important and relevant to consider. The data that I have gathered, I again have put in this spreadsheet, and I will just jump right in and go through each of the cells instead of explaining the entire spreadsheet to begin with. I will jump into each of the cells and go through the spreadsheet as I go. That way you can know what each of them mean, what the information inside of each cell is. So I first started with a date column. Of course, this is for organization purposes and to keep a record. These pieces of information I gathered throughout the trip in real time. I either wrote them, took photos, or somehow recorded these. As you can probably tell in your screen, there are dark text and there are grayed out text. The grayed out text are the pieces of information for which I don't have hard evidence for. These are very close estimations through extrapolation and other means, but they're quite accurate, I believe. The ones with the dark text are backed up by evidence. I either recorded it somehow throughout the trip or have some type of physical evidence for. So you can understand that not everything is rock solid when it comes to having evidence here, but I believe it to be very, very accurate. So we'll go with cell number 1 here on the top left. Date, of course, it's very convenient to have. Important. Time, the time that I arrived at the charging station. Basically, I went throughout the trip, and every time I stopped to charge, I recorded the information from that part of the trip, from that what I call leg of the trip. So when I start the trip is this first row. That's the start of the trip. And of course, when you start the trip, you're not going to have traveled kilometers, for example. So at the start of the trip, of course, you're going to record, like I did here, my starting kilometers from my odometer. Of course, I have also included these units in miles, these amounts, figures in miles as well, for your convenience. So there's start city, start state, and of course I don't have the range remaining at charge start because right there I have not charged. That's the start of the trip. The same thing goes for this column here, the range remaining at arrival at the start of the charge, range in miles, range in kilometers available at departure. I do have that information here, and it was about 390 kilometers. Of course, that is indicated on the dashboard, not necessarily what I am going to get, because it all depends on my driving style, conditions of the road, all kinds of stuff, how much weight is in the vehicle, traffic conditions, speed driven, all that stuff, all those factors could determine your actual range. This is also very important, the percentage shown on your dashboard of the range available. That's the percentage of charge in your battery. Of course, the time at departure is very important, and I will show you why here in a minute. It's important to record the time that you depart the time that you arrive at the charging station and plug in, and the time that you end charging and depart. That is very important. Of course, I don't have a charge time, the time taken to charge, because this is just the start of the trip. Percentage of charge used on the last leg of that trip is not available because I'm just getting started with the trip. Indicated range in kilometers used, that's going to be blank for this start. Indicated mileage used. Charging station network used, none, because I'm just starting the trip. Cost to change total session, cost to charge in that total session is not available there because I did not charge. Rate per kilowatt hour, not there because of course I have not charged. Total kilowatt hours bought, not there for that part. Kilometers per kilowatt hour estimate, blank, and miles per kilowatt estimate is blank. So that is the start of the trip, this whole row. The second row is basically when it starts getting interesting, because I have already begun to gather very precious and important data, real world data for an electric vehicle on the road, driving at normal or conventional speeds on the highway and regular roads. And this is not crawling or attempting to maximize your range or anything. This is driving very normally at normal speeds on the highway, doing the speed limits, etc. So after I arrive at the first stop, I recorded the time, recorded my odometer reading. Here I forgot to do that, but I did extrapolate it given the distance to this location, and I did also include it here in mileage for convenience if you want to do your calculations in mileage. And these are the traveled kilometers for this part of the trip. Very important number, and in miles as well, because that tells you what amount of distance you covered using what amount of battery charge, which is going to be shown here. So going back, of course, I recorded my location where I charged, where I stopped and charged. Of course, the very important remaining percentage of the battery is recorded here. What it shows as the range here, very important. The range that is shown at arrival, that is the range available in kilometers, before I began to put charge in the vehicle. And I will explain why that's so important here shortly. This is the same amount shown in miles. And once I finished charging at 99% charge of this is the battery percentage charged, I had on the dashboard shown about 390 kilometers. So I stopped charging at 2 p.m. and the times that I start and that I end, I put them in decimal hours. What that does is makes it a lot easier to calculate how long I spent at each location charging, which is right here For example, at that location I spent exactly about 1 hour. At this one I spent about an hour and 15 minutes. Of course, these are in decimal, so if you're not familiar with that, you can convert decimal hours to regular hours. There's plenty of websites that can do that for you. And there's a simple formula also you can use. So these are the charge times, and my average charge time was close to 1 hour, 0.94 hours. That's why this recording this time is very important. One of the most important figures or pieces of data here on this study is these three. 59%, that's the percentage of charge used for this part of the trip. That means to go this much, 238 kilometers, I used about close to 60% of the battery, of the entire battery. That is the 100% charged battery. This is the indicated range of kilometers used on the dashboard. This is the actual kilometers used, but this is what the dashboard showed that you used. And there's a formula for that shown here. Of course, you can see the formula up here when I click on each of the cells. Oops, back out. So this is the same figure in miles. So these numbers are so important because from these numbers you derive the all-important efficiency of that part of the trip, which is this one. That's your kilometers per kilowatt hour estimate. That's basically telling you how many kilometers you could travel per 1 kilowatt hour unit. That's the unit used for electric vehicles, kilowatt hours. And of course, this vehicle has about 66 kilowatt hours in its battery. So you can appreciate how much of that battery you actually used to travel a certain amount of distance. This information here basically is for you to know how much energy you put in your vehicle, how much it cost you, rate per kilowatt hour. That's the rate that the charging station charges you per kilowatt hour. Very important. And the total amount of money you spent per charging session. Notice that I have put some color in these figures here. That's because I basically believe that anything over 35 cents is high for per kilowatt hours. As you can see, a lot of these were pretty high, the rates, and I have learned that some stations charge taxes and also fuel tax given by or imposed by the municipality, the city, state on each kilowatt hour, which is pretty disturbing because a lot of states and municipalities also charge you a fuel tax when you register your electric vehicle on top of your normal registration fees. So a lot of them are charging when you charge at the charging station, especially fast charging. Especially here, look at this one, 60 cents. That's definitely has some fuel taxes attached to it. That's 60 cents per kilowatt hour. I paid a whopping $35. at that charging station. This is the amount of course of kilowatt hours bought. So of course this is probably among the highest I put in, the highest I put in during the trip, but it was quite expensive. So that's basically each row of this trip. I'm not going to go through each row again because it's just going to repeat the same. And just to highlight maybe a few important pieces of data. By using, and for example this one, 85% of the battery, I traveled very close to what the range of the vehicle is purported to be, which is 348 kilometers. So by just using 85% of the battery, I traveled 326 kilometers. That's very good. So this vehicle apparently can easily outperform its rated EPA range. 78% of the battery got me 315 kilometers. 50% of the batteries got me 221 kilometers. So especially this one right here, these two got pretty close to the actual range of the vehicle, and these also. As you can see, the efficiency number is also very important. For example, right here, the efficiency was not so great at 3.6 kilometers per kilowatt hour. So moving on to the bottom cells here, this is the actual kilometers traveled in miles as well. And this is very important. It took 12 stops to go through the entire 2,883 kilometers. This is something that many people would appreciate, knowing that it will take you this many stops to travel that amount of kilometers or miles. Again, that is about 1,791 miles. Of course, that was round trip for the entire trip. But expect to stop about this much for this particular vehicle. Of course, if you have a different vehicle, even if it's this same brand and model, they have different battery sizes. I believe there is one that has 87 kilowatt hours, which goes a lot farther. So of course, all of these are going to change if you have a different model, different type of vehicle, etc. Expect to spend about 1 hour per charging session. That is in a fast charging session, the CCS combo type plugs. That's the DC fast charging. If you charge slow, of course you're going to spend a significant amount of time more over that. I'm talking about double, triple, 4 times that amount. Probably more in many cases. This is the total indicated range kilometers used. That's an estimate from the drive computer from the vehicle as to how much distance you covered. And of course, this is gotten from this, which is, of course, not your actual driven kilometers or miles, but it is very close, I believe, within 10%, I believe. And these are very important numbers as well here. Total cost to charge for this one trip. So expect to pay about this much, give or take, to travel that distance. That is the average rate of kilowatt hours that I paid throughout the trip. About 45 cents per kilowatt hour. A bit high. Could be a lot less. The total kilowatt hours bought, that is the amount of energy that I had to use throughout the trip, which is 465 kilowatt hours and change. This is the average kilometers per kilowatt hours used, which is 5.32 kilometers traveled every kilowatt hour, which is okay, not great. And the average miles per kilowatt hour is 3.3, again being okay. So I believe the performance of the vehicle overall was acceptable, very acceptable. Not stellar, not superb, but it was very, very acceptable and satisfying. I spent a bit more than I would have liked, but that is because I basically charged at very expensive charging stations. I did get a break right here. If I could bring your attention to this one here, you may ask, why is there 0 here? That's because I charged about 55 kilowatt hours for free at this station. The gentleman here at this station was quite friendly and allowed me to charge for free at a dealership at a Nissan in Philadelphia. So the rate was zero at the time, and the efficiency was quite low for that part of the trip, where I covered about 198 kilometers. This part of the trip, you may want to ask why there's no information here. That is because that's not a charging stop. Even though I put some information here about the vehicle, I did not charge. As you can see, the percentage is the same when I stopped as the percentage when I left. That is this part of the study. There's additional information here, very important, and that is basically a comparison of what would have been like if I would have driven a gas operated vehicle. Would I have paid more, the same, less? So that basically justifies many people the financial value, the economic value of an electric vehicle. So if I would have driven a gas efficient vehicle as shown here in this first part, this many kilometers, 2,883, and by having the charging cost that I just told you, which is I transferred it here, I paid about $196 total. So by paying that much, how would it compare to a gas driven vehicle? Again, this is a 30 mile per gallon vehicle here shown, about 48 kilometers per gallon. So the potential gallons of fuel that I would have used is about 60. This is the price of the fuel at the time of the trip, $3.30. and I would have spent about $198 on that same exact trip. So a bit more than I actually did. So I did a bit better than a 30 mile per gallon vehicle would have done, or a 48 kilometers per gallon vehicle would have done. When I go here, this is a average vehicle, I believe, whether it's an SUV, pickup truck, or a not so efficient gas operated vehicle, which is about 20 miles per gallon, 32 kilometers per gallon. I would have spent about $297 to basically perform the same. If I go to a hybrid vehicle or a very gas efficient vehicle, what I call here a hyper efficient vehicle, gas operated, of 50 miles per gallon, that is about 80 kilometers per gallon, I would have paid significantly less than I paid up here. I would have paid $118. So I would have saved better than $80 for that trip. But of course, this is using a hybrid or equivalent vehicle. So that is it for this presentation. Hope you gathered some very valuable information, and please comment or shoot me your thoughts about this study, and was it to your expectation of the performance of this particular vehicle? Did you get any kind of insights into it? Can this be improved? Is this missing information that I should have had? And of course, this is going to probably be available for you to download and study, or you can again duplicate this or perhaps make it even better. Thank you very much. Have a great day or night.